possibility number 4, and this is the one that, man, this has happened in my life a lot. Maybe God has something better. That happens a lot. I've been praying for this. You see, here's the deal. Tucked away in Ephesians, an epistle, a letter that Paul wrote to a group of Christians in a city called Ephesus. It's kind of about 2/3 of the way back in your New Testament. In that little letter to the Ephesians, chapter 3, verse 20, Paul writes, God can do exceedingly and abundantly more than all we can ever ask or even imagine. I can imagine a lot. Can't you? God blows that away. So there have been a lot of times when I've been praying saying, okay, God, I got this all figured out. I know exactly what you need to do. You just need to fix everybody else and the world will be fine. Right? No, you know what I'm saying. I just need you to do this, take that away, and make this work out on Thursday, and it'll all be good. And God's like, oh, Brad. You know, I'm looking at eternity, and you're looking at the next 72 hours. You know, I got something better. I got something better in mind than that. Some of you are feeling this. That's good. 1 John chapter 5, verses 14 and 15. Okay, now listen. This is the same verse that we started with, but I want to unpack it a little bit more. Here's what John writes to us. This is the confidence that we have in approaching God, that if we ask anything, and here's the line that I have underscored, according to His will. If we ask anything according to His will. If you dig into the language, the Greek underneath that, you get, if you ask anything that is consistent with His plan, anything that is consistent with His purpose for your life. Now, if you've been here very often, you've heard me talk about God's purpose for our life. Romans, if you're taking notes, you might write down Romans 8:29. Romans chapter 8, verse 29. It tells us God's purpose for our life. In verse 28 is the one we love to quote. We know that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him and who've been called according to His purpose. Right? And then he goes on in verse 29, for those God foreknew, He also predestined. That just means He looked down through history and said, okay, these are the folks who are going to trust in Jesus. I'm predestining something for them. He predestined that they would be made into the image of His Son. That's what spiritual growth is all about. That we grow up as we become more like Jesus. In our love for the Father, in our focus on kingdom values, not worldly values. As we grow up and say, it's not about me, it's about the Father. It's about my citizenship is in heaven. I'm here, I want to love people the way Jesus loved people. I want to preach righteousness and call people to repent and turn to God the same way Jesus did. I want to serve, be His hands and feet, His mouth. As we grow and more into His likeness, that's God's purpose for us. That is really the underlying backdrop to this whole verse that John is writing. That if we ask anything that's in keeping with that purpose, we know that He hears us. And if we know that He hears us, whatever we ask, we know that we have what we've asked of Him. So we know, Father, make me more like Jesus. Lord, shape my attitude so that it reflects Your Son. Lord, give me strength to overcome this temptation. Chip that out of my life so that I can live for You. Lord, make me more loving with these folks that are difficult. You know? We know that God hears those prayers, and because those are in keeping with His purpose. Clearly, I probably don't even need to say this, but I want to. I think it might still be applicable for some of us. Clearly, He's not saying that prayer is a blank check. Really got to let go of this notion that God is a genie in a bottle and we're asking Him for stuff that we want. Right? I went through this and probably have done this more times than I can even bring to mind. But I remember one time when I was a little boy, maybe I've told you this story, but I grew up really close to the Anderson Airport. I grew up in Anderson, Indiana. There was an airport just outside of town, and it was a small airport, so there were these little single-engine prop planes that would fly in and out of there all the time, and I loved to watch them, and it was cool. Well, when I was about 7 or 8, I wanted an airplane. And I prayed with the faith of a child. It doesn't get any better than the faith of a child. Every night I would lay my head on my pillow and say, God, And I had it all picked out. God didn't even have to design it. I knew what it was. I want a yellow one. I want dual wings, right? Not just the single. I want those old school World War I, right? Yellow prop plane. And every morning, this shows you how aware I was of things. I would get up every morning and I would tiptoe down. We had a 2-car garage, and I would look in there for my plane, as if a plane would fit in our 2-car garage. And but I saw them way up there in the sky. They look little up there. So I'd never been right beside one. I mean, they're massive. They're really pretty big. If you've ever been right beside one. And it never was there. God just said, Brad, you're cute, and I love you. But no, we're not going to do the plane thing, right? But then later on in my life, I had another situation, and you've heard me talk about this before too. My whole brain tumor thing, man. 20 years old, right after I gave my life to Christ, I get diagnosed with this benign brain tumor. I go through the surgery, and I lose this huge percentage of my eyesight. And I'm never going to drive again, and I'm like, oh man, what's going on? God, what is this? And I prayed as hard as I've ever prayed in my life. And I made sure my relationships were right. And I made sure my motives were right. And I believed. And I did it all. I prayed with others. I agreed in prayer. Where 2 or 3 are gathered, right? And if 2 or 3 agree on anything, it's going to happen. And I had all kinds of friends who came from persuasions that said, you just need to claim your healing, and all these kind of things. And God said, Brad, just like he said to Paul, my grace is sufficient for you, Brad. Remember when Paul prayed for his thorn to be removed? If you've read that. Paul had an ailment and he prayed, God, 3 times earnestly he prayed, God. Nobody needs to tell Paul to have more faith. And it didn't happen. And so God said to me, Brad, I got something better. Now it took me about 2 years to figure that out. But he said, Brad, I got something better. I got a different kind of vision for you. I want to give you vision not for the things of this life, but for the kingdom. I want to give you vision for ministry. I want to give you vision for trusting me and relying on me and depending on me and letting me work in those areas where you realize you just can't do that and you need me. And has it been hard? Yeah, sometimes it's been hard. Would I trade any of it? No, I wouldn't. I'm grateful for the thorn in my life because of the lessons it's taught me about Jesus. Now, here's why I bring that up. I bring my story up to hopefully maybe remind you of your story. What's your thorn? What's your struggle? What's your cross, so to speak, that we're bearing? Everybody says, everybody's got a cross to bear. What's your thing that you've prayed for and it's just not resolving the way you think it ought to? Is the Lord today saying, I got something better? And here's the key to that. You got to let God define better. Because you're like, well, I got something better too. But it doesn't look like that. And friends, the only way to receive God's better is to surrender. Let it go. Let it go. Quit striving. Quit fighting. Quit trying to manipulate it. Say, God, it's yours. Show me what's your better plan. I'm telling you, in my story, when I let go, that's the day that I thought, maybe I can go to Anderson University. And then I started school, and then I met this girl from Pennsylvania. And she was cute. And I can't see that well, but I can see that. I could tell you, I could bore you with all the details. But anyway, it was awesome. And I began to see God's hand. Let go. And let God give you his better. Let him teach you what that is. If that's your situation today.